tutorial on how to make a Deco mesh wreath. The first thing I usually do is pick out my sign or my embellishment, and then I choose my ribbons to coordinate with that. So in this case, I've chosen 4. I've got my Grinch legs, and I found a coordinating candy cane ribbon, and then the fun polka dot, and then a solid just to keep it from being too busy. You're also going to need a roll of 10-inch Deco mesh. For this one, I've chosen this bright red and lime with the little white snowy stripes in it. And then I like to use these 15-inch wreath bases from Craft Outlet or Sims Pottery. You can see that they're elevated, so you're going to get a much fuller wreath than you would if you use the basic wire wreaths from Dollar Tree. I do like to use those if I'm making a pancake wreath that needs to fit behind a storm door. But otherwise, I like to go big, and I like to use these elevated bases. This one, again, is a 15-inch, so your finished wreath is going to be about 24 or sometimes 26 inches. These wreath bases have 18 sets of ties. So if you're working with 4 ribbons, you're going to need 9 of each ribbon, and I divide them into pairs. So in this case, I'm going to be alternating these 2 and these 2 when I get ready to add the ribbons. I'm going to put those aside for right now and show you how we get started making the base. I usually start on the top rung. It really doesn't matter, but this is how I do it. So I'm just going to go around and open all the ties to make this step easy. And then I've got my mesh over here. I like to just gather it, leaving a couple of inches. And it's important to keep the edges going under so that your mesh doesn't get twisted. So I'm starting right here on the top ring, and I'm putting it in there nice and tight, pushing the mesh all the way down. You should be able to pull on it without it coming out. Now, for my poofs, I like to do 10 inches. Some people like to measure and be exact, and so for that reason, I've got a piece of painter's tape here. I cut it to 12 inches long so that I can measure my ribbon pieces, which are 12 inches. But I've also marked a 10-inch mark here, and what I do is line up my tie with this end and then measure over here to my 10-inch line. And that gives me a nice 10-inch poof. But I found another way that works just as well without exact measuring if you're not an exact measurement kind of person. These ties tend to be approximately 5 inches apart, give or take. So what I'll generally do is take my mesh and I'll run straight across like that. I skip one and go to the next one. So that's 10 inches. And then I'm going to bring it back and put it in the tie next to where I started. So it's kind of like 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And then as I go, I like to fluff out each poof and kind of just make sure they are looking similar. Sometimes the ties might be a little too close together or a little far apart, and I still kind of stick with that 10 inches and it works out fine. So again, I'm going to go over 2 and back 1. And I give it about 2 twists. I don't worry about making it too secure because I'm going to come back and put my ribbons on top of that. So let me hold it up so you can see exactly what I'm doing. I'm measuring, I'm skipping 1, going over to the next one, and then I'm going back to secure it. Opening my poofs as I go. Now this part can go pretty quick once you get going. You can see how it's a lot faster if you don't bother measuring exactly. I go over 2 and back 1. Over 2 and back 1. Over 2 and back 1. So we've already gone all the way around the top rung. So now we're going to find the closest set of ties that's on the bottom. And we're just going to bring that mesh. Let's see if I can turn it so you can see it. We're going to bring that mesh straight down into those ties. We're not doing a poof. We're just bringing it from upstairs to downstairs and securing it. Okay. Then I'm going to keep doing the same thing. I'm going to open up my ties so it goes quickly. Okay, so now the same thing, I'm going to go around 2 and back 1. On this level, the loops, the poofs tend to be just a little bit bigger than 10 inches, but that's okay. See how nicely that fills in the gaps? Over 2. Uh-oh, we've lost a tie. So every now and then you get one where this happens. What I'm going to do is just take my 2 pieces and give them a couple of good twists. And I'm just going to wrap it right around the frame. Give it a couple of twists and it's good as new. So again, we're going to go over 2, back 1. 2 twists. Over 2, back 1. If you're trying to make a lot of wreaths and make a profit at it, it's important to be kind of quick and be able to knock them out. And you might think you're saving money if you buy the Dollar Tree wreath frames, but at the end of the day, you spend more time adding your own pipe cleaners and all that. And if you spend a little bit more and get the quality frame, you're saving time, which in the end, you're saving money. I'm still going over 2 and back 1. Over 2 and back 1. If you buy your mesh from one of the big box stores, you have to be careful because a lot of times at Michael's or even Hobby Lobby, some of the rolls are only 18 or 19 feet. Whereas if you buy it from a Sims Pottery or Craft Outlet or one of the online reputable suppliers, it's going to be 10 yards or 30 feet. If you get the 10-yard rolls, what I have found is that if I just go around the wreath on each level and stop, 2 rolls of mesh is enough to make 3 wreaths. But if I want my wreath to be really full, what I do is when I get around here, back to where I started on the bottom level, I'm going to go around again and just use this whole roll of mesh. And I actually prefer doing that because I found I just end up with so many bits and pieces of extra mesh that I didn't use, and I don't have a lot of storage space. So I would rather just go ahead and use the whole thing and make the wreath really full and fabulous. Okay, so now we've gone all the way around. To do the 3rd level, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, again, come over 2 and back 1, and I'm working this one in between the top poof and the bottom poof. But I'm going to attach it in the ties on the bottom. Okay, so I'll turn that around. So we've got 1, 2, 3 poofs, and I'm attaching it at the bottom. But you'll see this just makes it so much more full. This isn't necessary because if you're adding lots of ribbon and a sign and a bow, it's going to be full either way. So if you need to save a little money, that's a good way to do it. Just go around twice and save the rest of your roll. Always order 2 rolls so that you can get 3 wreaths out of it. If anybody is trying to do this and really struggling with this third part and you need a slow down or a close-up or have questions, just shoot me a message and I'm more than happy to try to explain it better or show it more close up. After you do this for a while, you get to where you can really kind of eyeball what 10 inches and 12 inches looks like, and can be pretty consistent without having to measure a lot. I was talking about making sure your mesh is 10 yards and good quality. The same thing goes for ribbons. I've noticed that over the last couple of years, the big box stores have shrunk their ribbon rolls down to sometimes 18 or 20 feet instead of 30, which makes a great big difference when you're trying to make bows and you're going to run out. And the other thing is to make sure you're buying good quality ribbon. A lot of times people will buy inexpensive ribbon as they're learning because they don't want to waste the expensive ribbon. What I found is that if you use better quality products, it looks better. You're not going to be happy with it if you use the cheap ribbon. So when I buy ribbon, I like to pull a little bit out and actually feel it, make sure it's got a nice body to it, and make sure it's not real thin and flimsy. Okay, so we've made it all the way back around here. So I've got 3 poofs in every set. And so what I'm going to do now is just give this a cut. Oh, I don't know what I did with my scissors. Okay. And I like to tuck that little end piece down into the center so you can't see it. And at the end, when I'm finished, I usually go back in with a zip tie and secure that to the back of the frame. You tuck that in and it's out of sight. Okay, so there we've got a really nice full 24 or 26 inch wreath base. Next we're going to take the ribbons and decide how you want to pair them. I've decided to do these 2 together and then these 2. So just pick which one you want to start with. I'm going to go with this one. Now again, if you're a measuring person, you can fold your ribbon in half to find the center, and then that's where you're going to scrunch it up in the middle. I don't do that because I can just eyeball it, but I'm just going to go again to the center, scrunch it up, and then I'm going to crisscross these 2 to make an X. And then I'm going to come in to any spot on the wreath. I usually start on the top, and I'm pushing the ribbon down in there tight and giving it a couple of twists. Again, give it the pull test. Pull on that ribbon. If it pulls loose, you don't have it in there tight enough and it's going to fall apart on your customer. Okay, so then I'm going to go with the other set of ribbons, and I'm just going to alternate all the way around. It doesn't really matter which one you put on top, but I do like to try to be consistent. And then I'll just spread those out a little bit. And because the ribbon is wired, you can kind of go in and fluff it and make it look nice. Now you'll notice on the Grinch legs, it's a directional ribbon. Some people really like to make sure that the Grinch legs are right side up all the way around. Some people don't care, but if that's going to be important to you, start at the beginning and make sure, you know, this, I've got the legs going this way, so right here I might want to do the same thing. I tend to not worry about it too much, because by the time you're done, the whole thing is just big and busy and beautiful, and nobody's gonna notice those kinds of things. That being said, if you do care, I notice my candy canes are upside down here. So I'm going to turn those the same direction as my Grinch legs. I'm just going to do this all the way around. When you finish the top row and you're moving to the bottom, what I like to try to do is find a set of ties on the bottom row that's directly behind a top one, and then put the opposite ribbon there. And that just kind of helps to keep the ribbons alternating. You almost always end up with two that are the same, that are really close together. But I've found that adding a bow somewhere seems to really help. If you have a spot where you notice that the patterns are the same and they're too close together, that's where you stick your bow. And I'm kind of jumping around from the top to the bottom at this point, but it's probably easier if you do one whole level and then move to the other. Okay. Now, as you're going along, if you realize that one of your directional ribbons isn't going the way you want, like this one here, the Grinch legs are upside down, you can just grab that whole set of ties and just give it a twist and then fluff it back up. And you're ready to go. Now, on this type of wreath, I don't usually do anything with these ties because I think they kind of blend in and you don't really notice them. But if you don't care for them, you can just bend them right back and tuck them into the back of the wreath like that. Or sometimes what I'll do is just come in with my wire cutters and just shorten them so they're only an inch or two long, just so they're not quite so crazy. But again, they don't really bother me. I think they add a little sparkle. Excuse me. And see, over here we've ended up with these directly aligned with each other, and the same here. So this is probably going to be a really good spot to put the bow. Turn them right side up. There we go. Okay, and that was pretty quick, and we're done with the ribbons. Okay, so I'm going to turn this around so you can see the Grinch right side up. Look how nice and full that looks. So I typically like to put my sign in the lower left side. And the way I attach my signs is I go ahead and cut off any hanger that's on it, and I staple floral wires onto the back with 1/4 inch long staples. If your sign is really thin and you're worried about the staple going through, you can add a little piece of cardboard or a little piece of a felt pad underneath your floral wire, and then do your staple, and that gives it a little more distance. So I'm gonna put the sign somewhere right in there, and then I like to put my bow over here a little bit up and to the right. And so I've pre-made my bow, but I haven't fluffed it yet. And if you're interested in learning how to make bows, that's going to be another tutorial that I will try to do soon. Okay, so I'm going to just come right in here. You can't really see what I'm doing. I've got a floral wire on the back of my bow, and I'm coming down right around one of the sets of ties, going around the wreath frame. And then I'm going to pull it. You can see I've got the floral wire on either side of that bar, and I'm just going to give it a few good twists. And I'll come back and clean that up when I'm finished. Okay, so then to fluff it, I'm bringing my tails around to the front. And then I'm just going to start at the bottom of the bow, which was the solid red. And just get in there and pull those in opposite directions. And then go to the next level. And this is where you want to make sure when you make your bow that you have it really secured tightly so that when you go to fluff your loops, they don't come apart. Okay. And then I'm going to come to the other side and do the same thing, starting at the bottom and just pulling those loops apart. Okay, so there we've got a really nice full bow, and that really helps to fill up the wreath, especially if you've got a small sign. In fact, you don't really have to put a sign on this. Some customers will actually ask me to remove the signs. Turn it back around so you can see. So I want to make sure I can read everything on the sign. I'm going to pull out my wires, and I'm going to position it about like that. So again, I'm going to just come in here with these floral wires and come down around a set of ties, pulling it through to the back. And I don't pull it too tight because I don't want the sign to flatten the mesh. I just want it to be secure enough that it doesn't wiggle around. Okay, give that a few twists. And then I'm going to come do the next one down here. When I'm putting my sign a little bit off kilter like this, I usually do a wire on these two corners and then the bottom corner. I don't bother up here because it's not necessary. Okay, then you want to be sure you pull out any ribbon that's caught behind the sign because you don't want to waste it. It's so pretty. And any mesh that kind of got smushed down there, go ahead and pull that out. And this one ended up a little upside down, so we're going to give them a spin. There we go. Okay, and then we have one more wire we need to attach down here. Give that a few twists. And there we have it.